Hello, YouTubers, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have 6 articles in this episode for you, and all 6 of the URLs are in the description of the video for your convenience. The first one here is off of foxnews.com, and it says, Wisconsin shootings. Police officer, 3 others killed, suspect in custody. Police officer and 3 other people were killed in a series of shootings Wednesday in northern Wisconsin that apparently began as a domestic dispute in a bank, officials said. Everest Metro Police Chief Wally Sparks said at a news conference the slain officer was from his department and that a suspect was in custody. Sparks did not release the officer's name or the names of the other 3 dead. Authorities took no questions at the brief news conference, but said there was no remaining threat to the public. I would like to send all of my thoughts and ask everybody listening thoughts and prayers to all the victims and their families, Sparks said. Please keep them in your prayers and be with our officers. Jason Smith, the deputy administrator for the State Department of Justice Division of Criminal Investigation, said more than 100 officers were investigating and more information would be released on Thursday. Shooting happened at a bank, a law firm, and an apartment complex where officers, including a SWAT team, had a standoff with the suspect for several hours before ending in a volley of gunfire around 5 p.m., police said. A woman who lives in the complex told the Associated Press she looked out her apartment window in the small town about 1:15 p.m. to see a squad car approach, and a few seconds later heard gunshots and saw the officer fall. Kelly Hansen, age 21, said she saw another officer put the wounded policeman in an armored SWAT vehicle and take him away. I thought, what's going on? I know what a gunshot sounds like and thought, this isn't good, Hansen said. Hansen said she stayed in her apartment until about 4:45 p.m. when she heard a volley of about 10 shots and began to freak out. Authorities eventually let her leave her apartment. It's tragic that had to happen, but I think they did a good job out here today, she told the AP. Dozens of police cars and emergency vehicles responded after the first shooting happened around 12:30 p.m. at Marathon Savings Bank in Rothschild. Officers responding to a reported domestic situation arrived to find 2 people had been shot. A second call then came about 10 minutes later from Tulusky, Kennedy, and Dirk's law firm in nearby Schofield. And then a third report came in about 1:30 p.m. from an apartment complex in Weston. SWAT members entered the apartment building about 2:30 p.m. The Wausau Daily Herald reported. Nearby schools and hospitals went on lockdown. The lockdowns were later lifted. Susan Thompson, a resident of the building, told the newspaper she heard gunshots and heard someone scream. As she left the apartment, police called to her to get inside and lock her doors. Thompson, age 21, said she had her 2-year-old daughter in the apartment. Officers later came to her door and helped her and her daughter outside, she said. Omar Say, age 31, who said he had just moved to the apartment complex, learned of the shooting after he arrived home to find dozens of squad cars outside. Say, who said he had moved to Wisconsin from Gambia, said he didn't understand why such things happen in America. This is crazy, he said. You have everything at your disposal. Why don't you make your life better instead of engaging in this? Good question. The next one we have is off of BizPack Review. It says, updates from London terror attack scene. Shots are fired outside Parliament. Cars mow down civilians. 4 people have died. Others sustained catastrophic injuries in an attack in London that police are treating as terrorism. London's Parliament is currently in lockdown after as many as a dozen people were run over on Westminster Bridge and a police officer was stabbed, Sky News reported. Witnesses have described an Asian man in his 40s running with a knife in hand towards Parliament over the Westminster Bridge, according to Sky News. There are also reports of a dozen people injured on Westminster Bridge after a car attempted to run down a number of pedestrians. The Prime Minister was said to have been voting in the division of lobby and was escorted out of the building by a plainclothes policeman and put in a car. Sky News understands she has now left the area. Staff inside Parliament have been told to stay inside their offices. An air ambulance landed in Parliament Square minutes after the incidents, and mechanics were treating 2 people at the scene. There are also reports of further violent incidents in the vicinity of the Palace of Westminster, but I hope colleagues on all sides will appreciate that it'd be wrong of me to go into further details until we have confirmation from the police and from House security authorities about what's going on, Commons leader David Lidington said. Police shot a suspect after a loud explosion. Tweets and some videos if you want to get read up on all of that. And I think that's about that's the end of the article itself. The next article that I have is off of USA Politics Now. Woman who attends UN meeting risks life to expose what Obama's Muslim sleeper cells are planning for U.S. neighborhoods. And here again, we have one that is teeny tiny little print. And let's see if we can blow her up here. Get it big enough to read. As liberals continue to fight President Trump tooth and nail on his migrant ban, a woman who's been sitting on many of the United Nations meetings regarding refugee resettlement to the United States is risking it all to raise alarm bells to those willing to listen. The information she has about a literal Muslim invasion is so disturbing that it proves that we are intentionally being taken over thanks to malicious actions of those at the highest levels of our government. And if our president is unable to stop what is happening with an executive order, America, as we know it, will soon be lost forever. The woman's identity in the following video is kept private due to the damning information she exposes about the hordes of terrorists being flown into America as we speak. She reveals that there is a blatant war on American sovereignty taking place, being orchestrated by Barack Hussein Obama, who continues to violate the law, though, by blocking President Trump's ban with judicial activism. Obama is secretly planting his Muslim foot soldiers in America as thousands of these unvetted vermin continue to come to America under the guise of the refugee program. After attending many meetings with the United Nations Office of Refugee Monitoring, she was able to drop the following bombshell on the sickening invasion taking place in America. She reveals that not only are these individuals flown into America at night so they go under the radar, but that they are being thrown on a plane and flown into our country with absolutely zero vetting process. She notes that many of them have many highly contagious uh, and see, or shaky, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but let's just say highly contagious diseases that were once eradicated from the United States, including leprosy, tuberculosis, smallpox, polio, and Giardia. She also dispels the propaganda that the invaders are primarily women and children, a tactic to pull on the heartstrings of the American people, stating the vast majority of refugees that we've received here in Missouri have been males between the ages of 15 and upwards of 45 years old. Josh Tolley notes the similarity to the situation we've seen playing out in Europe. She reveals that the invaders are brought in at night supposedly because the airfare is cheaper, but also because there is less public at the airport. In other words, it's easier for them to hide what they're doing to us. It's almost like they're making money running refugees, was a comment by the host. The guest says the agencies are responsible for setting new arrivals up with a place to live, welfare, food, Medicaid, and welfare and a housing allowance, in addition to the cash they receive on arrival. She states that the new invaders don't have any documentation, that they are in essence being given new identities upon arrival, many of them coming in with no more identity than a deceitful, or I'm sorry, try this again. Many of them coming in with no more identity than a description as FUNU, full name unknown. They were also pressured to identify the refugees in such a way that they would be qualified for Social Security long-term disability. Disturbing. is that after immediately given Social Security benefits, once they got to America, these invaders are then given complete new identities through Social Security cards and U.S. passports. And if states refuse to exercise their rights and refuse to play ball with these invasion programs, the federal government has a backup plan for that too. The Wilson Fish program gives the federal government legal authority to go in and violate state sovereignty, dropping off these Muslim invaders wherever they damn well choose. With these terrorists now free to roam, sleeper cells can then be activated at a moment's notice to carry out terror attacks on Americans. Obama did a wonderful job not only creating ISIS, but allowing them to rise to power. Now, all that's left for his plan to come into fruition is to invade America with his Islamic foot soldiers, and through judicial activism and blocking Trump's travel ban, this is how Obama will succeed. What makes it even more infuriating is that the liberal media will continue to cover Obama's treasonous ass, blasting concerned Americans as racists and bigots who want to implement a ban on these vermin as a way to keep terrorists from infiltrating America. The next article is off BizPac Review, and it says, after horrific Rockville school rape in Maryland, Dem-controlled House votes to be first sanctuary state. The response from Maryland Democrats to the rape of a 14-year-old girl in their state by a legal immigrant is to increase protections for illegals. The Democrat-controlled House of Delegates voted 83 to 55 to pass the Maryland Law Enforcement and Trust Act, which would prevent state and local law enforcement from helping federal immigrants authorities, Fox Baltimore reported. This bill is about the constitutional right of all Marylanders. State legislator Maurice Morales, who apparently thinks the Constitution applies to non-citizens, said. But Maryland Governor Larry Hogan called the bill outrageous and vowed to veto it. The Maryland House of Delegates tonight passed an outrageously irresponsible bill that will make Maryland a sanctuary state and endanger our citizens, he said on Facebook. This legislation would interfere with our state and local law enforcement's ability to cooperate with federal law enforcement authorities. I will veto this dangerously misguided legislation the moment it reaches my desk. But while some Democrats have shed their former bleeding heart ways in light of the horrific rape at Rockville High School, the state Democrats have continued to be tone deaf. It defends the bill on social media again, referencing the non-existent constitutional rights of illegal immigrants. And there's a series of tweets here. Maryland House of Democrats says MD Trust Act promotes understanding and respect between our communities and law enforcement. And Delegate Sanchez says, we are in no way stopping the federal government from doing what they're supposed to be doing. The next one we have here is off BizPac Review. It says, Univision's stunning admission about Rockville school rape case, Obama's policy versus Trump's. Spanish language network Univision made a stunning admission about Rockville high school rape case. Attorney Joseph Maloof told Univision's Pablo Gatto that President Donald Trump's immigration policy would have likely prevented the rape of a 14-year-old victim at the hands of an 18-year-old illegal immigrant, Henry E. Sanchez, and 17-year-old Jose O. Montego of El Salvador. If this had occurred now with President Trump's new executive order, what would the situation be, Gatto asked Maloof. It would be different because they would have arrested Mr. Sanchez and they would have detained him, and eventually he would have been deported, Maloof said. He wouldn't have been able to enter the area and obviously commit this crime. Fly in the face of the station's traditionally anti-Trump, pro-open borders position, mainly espoused by its top anchor, George Ramos, who said that the nation now belongs to Hispanic people. The next article that I have for you is off of Liberty Headlines, and it says, at least work requirements for Medicaid are now in Ryan care. Boy, I hope that thing don't go through, and I wish that they'd repeal the Obamacare thing and just government stay the hell out of health care. But let's read what it has to say. The idea of requiring work or education in return for Medicaid benefits may be catching on. A bill allowing states to impose such requirements, reported here at Liberty Headlines a week ago, has now been incorporated into the Obamacare replacement legislation that is expected to receive a vote in the U.S. House of Representatives on Thursday. Inclusion by name in Speaker Paul Ryan's manager's amendment already is being accredited with attracting significantly more support for the overall legislation from conservative House members. The original work requirement bill was introduced March the 9th by Republican Representative Morgan Griffith of Virginia. Modeled largely on successful provisions of the 1996 Welfare Reform Bill that cut traditional welfare rolls in half, the bill would allow but not compel states to implement work requirements for able-bodied Medicaid recipients. The disabled, pregnant, and elderly, among others, would be exempt. The states would have leeway to design the exact nature of these work requirements. Even before the new work provisions were officially included in the manager's amendment, the promise that they would be included helped sway at least one documented conservative opponent into support to move the bill to the Senate for further consideration. Sophomore Republican Gary Palmer of Alabama, a policy expert who ran a conservative think tank for 25 years, had voted against Speaker Ryan's original bill when it was presented last week to the Budget Committee. But after President Trump pledged to ensure that work requirements would be included, Palmer announced he would support the bill. In the earlier Budget Committee meeting, Palmer successfully authorized a motion to allow work requirements, but it was merely a non-binding sense of the committee, so he still awaited confirmation that the change would be made in the bill itself. Another key group of conservatives, the Republican Study Committee, also were swayed from skepticism to support because of the inclusion of work requirements, along with a provision letting states choose a different funding mechanism known as block grants. As Capitol Hill newspaper Roll Call reported, all but one of the 17 RSC steering committee members, not counting 4 ex officio members, have committed to voting yes on the bill. 8 or 9 of whom had shifted from a no or leaning no because of the Medicaid changes, RSC Chairman Mark Walker told reporters at the Capitol. Republican Whip Steve Scalise explained the agreement will not just allow states to impose work requirements, but also provide incentives for them to do so. Still, leaders of another group of even harder line conservatives, the House Freedom Caucus, said the incentives aren't enough. The group's chair, Republican Mark Meadows of North Carolina, said as long as the states have the option, but not the absolute mandate, to include work requirements, the provision isn't strong enough. For those and other reasons, Meadows and many of his Freedom Caucus compatriots remain opposed to the bill. Nonetheless, the incorporation of almost an entire new bill into larger major legislation less than 2 weeks after the bill was first introduced is a mark of how popular its central idea is among Republicans. The official 4-page summary of the manager's amendment explains the amendment adopts the language from Mr. Griffith's bill, H.R. 1381, which was modeled after the requirements and exemptions that exist in the main workforce program under the current welfare law. States could begin using this new option on October the 1st of 2017. The amendment grants broad flexibility to states to implement the requirement as they see fit. The work requirements are not the only part of the manager's amendment that are designed to attract more conservative support. The amendment also speeds some of the tax repeals that Ryan's bill originally waited 2 years to repeal, and more, quickly curtails the ability of states to further expand Medicaid eligibility. Still, because the Speaker's legislation leaves many Obamacare regulations in place to be dealt with in a later bill, conservatives such as Meadows vow to defeat it. Speaker Ryan and President Trump are reportedly working the phone lines to gather support for their bill, which is expected to result in a close vote either way on Thursday. And that's all I have for you this morning. If you like what I'm doing here, give it a thumbs up. Share it on your social media so everybody gets to hear the news. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done that. That way you'll stay informed.